Late in his life, famous atheist philosopher Antony Flew shocked his peers. He announced he had come to believe in a creator. His longtime colleague Richard Dawkins responded with a classic critique. Dawkins accused Flew of relying on the God of the gaps argument. The logic goes like this. When people encounter a natural phenomenon they don't understand, they attribute the cause to a creator. To a strict materialist, every event in the universe can be reduced to matter and energy interacting. Pointing to anything beyond those two elements is seen as a lazy retreat that stalls actual scientific research. But looking closely at how science actually operates, we have to ask a difficult question. Is inferring a creator always an intellectual surrender, or could it be a rigorous, necessary scientific deduction? When Newton laid out his laws of gravity, astronomers noticed irregularities in Uranus's orbit. They deduced an unobserved planet must be pulling on it, discovering Neptune. Astrophysicists use this exact same logic today. When stars at the outer edges of galaxies spin far too fast, they deduce the existence of dark matter, an invisible substance, to account for the missing mass. Dark matter and dark energy supposedly make up 95% of our universe. We cannot observe them, yet scientists who fill the gaps with these unobservable entities are awarded Nobel Prizes, not accused of taking the easy way out. The validity of a scientific theory doesn't depend on whether a cause is directly observable. It depends on whether the specific, measured effects demand that cause. Consider the fairy chimneys in Ürgüp, Turkey. Tourists often mistake these towering, balanced rock structures for ancient, man-made architecture. In reality, they are the result of volcanic eruptions, followed by thousands of years of wind and floodwater eroding the softer rock away. This gives us a clear equation. Combine matter, energy, and massive time to produce the appearance of design. Now imagine finding similar rock formations on another planet, but arranged in concentric circles, where the chimney counts correspond perfectly to prime numbers. Blind natural forces, like wind and erosion, can balance a rock, but they cannot count in prime numbers. A prime number sequence requires abstract a priori mathematical knowledge, information that exists independent of the rock itself. Because you cannot extract abstract mathematics from random chemical and physical interactions, the presence of that coded sequence requires a new element in our equation. It demands an intelligent agent. Down at the microscopic level, right at the origin of the first living cell, DNA operates exactly like a highly specific semantic data storage code. This scale visualizes the universal probability bound. It compares all possible atomic interactions since the Big Bang against the probability of randomly assembling a functional protein. Even if every particle ran chemical trials for 13.8 billion years, it wouldn't scratch the surface of the time required to generate bacterial code. When the required time exceeds the age of the universe by such a staggering margin, the random chance explanation loses its mathematical foundation. Blind interactions simply do not have the physical runway to author this level of biological code. This mathematical reality forces a reassessment of biology, starting with geneticist Barbara McClintock. Long before we fully mapped DNA, she discovered that organisms facing severe environmental stress actually reorganize their own genomes to survive. Today, an increasingly vocal group of biologists advocate for the third way of evolution. They observe that cells do not sit around waiting for random beneficial copying errors to occur. Instead, cells actively and cognitively engineer their own DNA. We see this when bacteria are attacked by antibiotics. They seek out neighboring cells and literally trade specific genetic blueprints to build resistance pumps. We see it in endosymbiosis, where two separate single-celled organisms negotiate a highly coordinated merger to survive as a single entity. These cells sense danger, process data, and actively rewrite their own code to adapt, which leaves biology with a massive unresolved paradox. How is a microscopic system executing this kind of high-level cognitive behavior without a brain? This animation illustrates a thought experiment known as Maxwell's demon. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that any closed physical system will naturally degrade into chaos and disorder, a process called entropy. Physicist James Clerk Maxwell proposed that the only way to reverse this degradation is by introducing a mechanism that actively sorts the molecules. To reverse entropy, that mechanism requires a continuous active injection of information. Living cells face the exact same physical law. In order to survive, maintain their complex structures, and engineer evolutionary adaptations over millions of years, they require a constant, directed stream of external information. Biology requires a continuous, intelligent input to function, but classical physics views the universe as a closed, rigid, mechanical clock that doesn't allow for outside intervention. For centuries, the scientific norm was strict determinism. The belief was that if you knew the starting position of every particle in the universe, you could predict exactly what would happen next. It was a closed loop of cause and effect. Then, quantum mechanics broke the clockwork. Experiments proved that particles exist in states of probability and can interact instantly across vast distances. This physical flexibility deeply unsettled classical physicists, including Albert Einstein. But this quantum indeterminism provides exactly what the biological evidence demands. It reveals that the physical universe is not a perfectly sealed machine. It has the built-in flexibility to receive continuous, imperceptible injections of information without violating the macro laws of physics. If biology requires a constant stream of information to fight entropy, and quantum physics reveals a universe open to that input, then the inference of a creator changes shape. It isn't a retreat into the gaps. It is the application of rigorous deduction to explain the presence of code and cognitive adaptation in our physical reality.